Good morning. I'm Alexis Delsin in for Jessica Lovell. Welcome to the Morning Medical Update. Who's tired this morning? It's a good tired though, right? Because the Chiefs won the Super Bowl, and it's better to be tired winners than tired losers. Dr. Ujoa and I were just talking about that. We are going to be on Wednesday at the Super Bowl parade celebrating our amazing doctors who also care for the Chiefs. So we're going to get to that in a little bit. But first, I'm in for Jess. Jess is off today. Very smart move, taking off the Monday after Super Bowl when the Chiefs play. Today we're talking about epilepsy. And we want you to take just a quick second and think, what do you know about epilepsy? The chances are you're thinking about seizures or maybe the strobe light warnings that we sometimes see on television before certain scenes, which, by the way, don't apply to all forms of epilepsy. You might know epilepsy involves the brain. The point is, unless you know someone living with epilepsy, you probably aren't aware of the sheer toll this disease takes on both patients and their loved ones. Today, we're meeting a mom who spent years searching for answers for her daughter. Her daughter suffered seizures for years, multiple times a day, every day. More than 20 years she suffered this, until she met with epilepsy experts right here at the University of Kansas Health System. And I happen to be sitting here with two of those experts. I also have Patrick Mahomes here. I took this from Dr. Hawkinson because he's been waving this around all day. So, Hawk, we're going to pass it back to him for the COVID count. Dr. Ujoa, though, I want to introduce you first. You're an epileptologist and the director of the Comprehensive Epilepsy Center at the University of Kansas Health System. We also have Dr. John Lever, a neuroradiologist specifically dedicated to epilepsy care. Thank you so much for raising awareness about epilepsy and everything that you both do to give patients hope and solutions. And joining us remotely is Grace Lindsey. Grace Lindsey is now living seizure-free thanks to brain surgery alongside her mom, Sheila Gill. Thank you both for joining us. And Sheila, I want to start with you. This must have been so distressing as a parent. How old was your daughter when she had her first seizure?
2.5.
A 2.5, so just a toddler. And do you remember what happened?
Yes, she actually just fell on the floor in the middle of the day and began what was called, I learned later, a fractured seizure, just on one side of her body. Her arm flapped, her leg flapped, her eyes kind of rolled back. I couldn't rouse her from that. Her lips started turning kind of blue. So I carried her out and put her on the sidewalk in front of our house and got out my little mom's CPR card and called 911. And then that began 27 years of medical institutions and doctors and lots of records and on a search to see if we could find out what started this one episode that led to hundreds a day and if there was ever going to be a cure or not.
There's really nothing more distressing than being a parent and seeing your child suffering. It just guts you. And you were on this quest for years trying to figure out what was happening to your daughter and how to fix it. How many different doctors and how many different diagnoses were there?
Probably at least 10 doctors. We saw doctors we either saw or got to the point where I realized I couldn't take off work. I was a single mom by then, with 3 children, 1 critically ill. And I began by taking off work, and we packed Grace up in the car, my dad and I would, and drive her to Arkansas Children's Hospital, Iowa, all over the place, and realized that was getting very expensive and providing us no answers. So then we began videotaping her seizures and sending them out all over the country. But again, we saw at least 10 different doctors with all sorts of erroneous diagnoses. One doctor said it was Rasmussen encephalitis, and she would be reduced to about the age of a 3-year-old. Before that, probably took her life. Another told me it was adrenal gland carcinoma. He told me that in the parking lot of his office on a Friday afternoon after doing some tests on her eyes. And I said, well, what does that mean? Well, that means it's fatal. And he walked off and got in his car.
Oh, my God.
And drove away Monday. Well, that was an erroneous diagnosis. I visited with doctors in Belgium, doctors in Canada, Stanford Stroke and Seizure Center, San Francisco, Arkansas Children's General, and everybody here in town. And really nobody could give us an exact diagnosis. One doctor even said it was an Arnold-Chiari malformation. where the cerebellum kind of drops down into your spinal column, and he wanted to remove a big portion of her nerves there in her spine. That could, if you take out too many, your head flops around, and that was a wrong diagnosis also. So I just vowed not to give up, and we just looked and looked. Meanwhile, Grace had every seizure med on the market with minimal control with some. We even purchased a service dog for her, a seizure alert dog who went everywhere with her for 13 years. He was great. And then we went to see our neurologist there at KU Med for a checkup, and learned, to our surprise, he had retired rather quickly, but a new doctor had taken over named Dr. Ujoa. And we met her, and probably within the first 30 minutes of our visit, she said, if you'll allow me to run some more tests on your daughter, I think I can help you.
Oh my gosh. That must have been
anybody said anything positive.
Music to your ears. And just what a relief to meet a doctor who knew that she could handle it and fix it. And we're going to get to that in just a moment. I want to ask you, Grace, what was it like growing up having to go to school while dealing with epilepsy?
I would fall asleep in class, and basically I would have to be taken home if I had a huge cluster of them.
The seizures.
Oh. And did you experience bullying?
Yeah.
Lots of bullying.
A lot of bullying.
Being left out of
activities.
Stigma.
I'm
There's
sorry
still a
to
terrible
hear that.
stigma. Really.
And when people know better, they do better. And people didn't know. And hopefully doing shows like this and having the bravery, Grace, to come on and share your story is really going to help other people and other moms and daughters and kids who might be going through the same thing. I want to ask Dr. Ujoa, what do you remember from the first time you met Grace?
Well, first, you're really testing my memory because it was back in like 2015. But I do recall a sense of really liking Grace's personality. She has this really unique personality, which I still appreciate it quite a bit. And then Mom, just like this quest that she's been on, trying to help her daughter.
After seeing so many doctors and getting so many wrong diagnoses, how is it that you were able to look at her and know within a visit that you had a hunch what was happening and that you could fix it?
I mean, I'll say this. Certainly, sometimes as the dust settles, things might be a little clearer. So I didn't meet her when she was a child. I met her as an adult. But ultimately, I think kind of going back to the basics of neurology and the basics of epilepsy, for us, really understanding and listening to the symptoms a person is having with the seizure can tell us like the entire story. And so for Grace, that first visit, it's one of the things I focus on. She said she could see things sort of moving in her environment, that she felt dizzy, and then Mom could see her eyes moving involuntarily. And so that automatically puts the seizures kind of towards the back of the brain, either in the parietal lobe or the occipital lobe. So you've already really narrowed things down, and then the testing is more to further pinpoint things and also try to answer the why. Why are there seizures coming from that area?
You know, another thing that I think sets you apart from everybody they saw just listening to their story is your bedside manner. The fact that Sheila, someone stood in a parking lot and told you, delivered such wrong and bad news that turned out to be wrong and quickly on a Friday in a parking lot is horrible. And sorry, that I just want to acknowledge sorry that happened to you, and that would never happen with Dr. Ujoa, who, by the way, is also an epileptologist, which is a phrase or a title that you might not know, our non-medical audience. You're an epileptologist, which means this is everything. This is what you do. This is your whole thing is epilepsy. So you're the one they want to go to. And I also want to bring in Dr. Lever, because Dr. Lever, you spotted something that other doctors must have missed. There are these MRIs that you do. Are they different than other MRIs?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, I think it's just not well known, what you get from an MRI. Like you go to McDonald's and you spend like $10 and everybody knows exactly what they're going to get. You get an MRI and you have no idea, and unfortunately it makes all the difference in the world in some cases, and certainly not all MRIs are the same. So the big differences would be, one, just the imaging itself, the equipment. The standard MRI is like a 1.5 Tesla magnet. That's what most scanners are. Here at KU, when you get an epilepsy scan, we only use 3 Tesla, the most powerful magnets that are twice as powerful, and we have custom protocols that are specifically designed to detect very subtle causes of epilepsy that otherwise would be missed.
We want to put some of those MRIs up on a screen so that you can help us understand. This is one of those MRIs from Grace's brain pre-surgery. What are you seeing here? Because my eyes don't see anything.
And it's true. Looking at this, I mean, it looks like there's, it looks like a symmetric brain, in that occipital lobe, with the help of the epilepsy team saying, there's an area of interest in that right occipital lobe or left occipital lobe, there is an abnormality. And then when we magnify it here and we manipulate that image, you can really see that there is, a pretty significant asymmetry, and it's called focal cortical dysplasia. There's an ill definition of the gray-white matter interface there, and a blurring, and it's a developmental abnormality, and it's one of the common causes of epilepsy.
So because Dr. Joa knew from the eye movements and things, okay, it's in the back lobe, you knew to look at that specific lobe, and that's where you noticed those abnormalities there.
Yeah, working with an epilepsy team, it's invaluable to have someone telling you where to look. I mean, it really, really helps, as you can imagine, knowing where to look in the brain, but also just, having the experience of working in an epilepsy center, being able to look at a high volume of epilepsy imaging, whereas, someone else may never look at epilepsy imaging their entire career.
Right.
As opposed to doing it routine basis, it really, really helps. So this is something that we see a lot here.
And Dr. Ulloa, what happens once you see the lesions?
Well, so then we kind of build from there. So it's one of the pieces of the puzzle, but that's how I always say it. It's pieces of a puzzle that we have to put together. But for Grace, this was like a complete game changer. So then at that point, I knew she would be a good surgical candidate. It's the type of lesion that when you remove it and remove it completely, the person really has a great chance of being seizure-free. And so at that point, we had that discussion, and the next step could have been to go ahead and remove the lesion, but we wanted to further outline where was vision in relationship to this lesion and to where her seizure started, because the occipital lobe is where your vision is, so already we know there's going to be a risk there. So that's where the grid study came in, which is having electrodes actually within the brain rather than outside the brain.
This is a really cool picture that we're looking at on our screen. So did you monitor her brain by putting electrodes on it or on her head? How do you monitor that?
So the neurosurgeon that also partners with us essentially opened up a part of the skull to be able to slide this grid. So it's kind of like a sheet that goes right on top of the brain, and it was really just centered right over the lesion. And so that's a picture of Grace when she was having this study done. The goal is to record the seizures so we can really map them to the brain, but also there is a study I can perform at the bedside where I connect a machine to the electrodes and send like electrical impulses to it. What that does is activate the function of the brain in that area. And so for Grace, focusing on the vision, that's what we were looking at. It did show that really throughout the grid, throughout that part of the brain, there was visual activation. She could tell me she was seeing, kind of flashing lights off to the corner.
And then when it comes to the surgery, this surgery involves removing part of Grace's brain.
Correct.
And that obviously is going to be jarring for anyone to hear is going to happen. What part of the brain would you need to cut out? How big of a part do you need to remove?
Well, in this specific case, it's basically the lesion.
Just the lesion?
The outline of the lesion, yes.
Okay.
And so the grid study we did confirm that. And then in the operating room with Dr. Chang, also sort of mapping further where we can see, is there abnormal electrical activity still that we see even when Dr. Chang removed the lesion? But ultimately, we were able to remove all of it.
So when you look at your screen for our audience at home, the bottom, the right picture there, the bottom right corner is where the part that you removed.
Yes, not my hands,
With
Dr.
not,
Chang.
not you personally, right? So if you're looking at someone front on, is it the back right part of her?
So
what
on
is it?
images, right and left are backwards. So it's
Got
actually the left occipital lobe. So yeah,
Okay.
right in the back of the left.
Back left part of her brain you had to remove. And what were the possible implications of that? Possible
So
side
the
effects?
big discussion, and I mean, I'll never forget this, and they probably won't either, was her vision. We talked about research that had been done about occipital lobe epilepsy and removal of that kind of abnormality. There's really not that much data out there, but with the data that is out there, with all the testing we did, I basically told Grace that she would have a decline in her vision off to the right side because the left occipital controls the right vision. But then the question of how much, how extensive would the decline of the vision be, really was hard to say exactly. But I tried to be kind of conservative and tell her, 50% chance that it would be something significant, meaning kind of the entirety of the right side of her visual field.
Would just be blacked out?
I think for all intents and purposes, I think you could say it that way. It's not your right eye, it's the right field of vision.
Okay.
That being said, in my heart, I knew that it was less than 50% just because we were not removing normal brain. We were removing very abnormal brain.
Right.
So how could all that vision, live within that? But you have to give people some kind of percentages so they can make decisions based on that. So I preferred to be conservative and say, okay, 50% risk that it would be something significant.
And Grace, understandably, you were really nervous about brain surgery. Is it true at first you said, nope, not yet, not doing it?
Yeah.
And then you left the
Yes.
building with Mom?
Yeah.
Yes, she made that decision, and then I burst into tears and embarrassed myself with the whole medical team, and they unhooked Grace, put her back in surgery, and closed her back up, and away we went. Which, they said that some of this is common. It's a big, scary procedure, and some people choose to opt out or to think about it. And literally, we got in the car to drive home, and we're out of the parking lot there at the hospital, and Grace turned to me and said, "What?"
I should have had the surgery.
So I wanted.
Oh, man.
But anyway, we got back home and called Dr. Joa and Dr. Chang and said, well, she's changed her mind. And so we rescheduled it for a year later. That gave Grace plenty of time to.
I was scared.
She's very scared. Think about
Sure.
it. She's also. I gave her a year to think about it and to get everybody else back in place again. And the second time, she braved it, and the surgery it's life-changing. It was a miracle. It's life-changing.
Well, Grace, you needed a minute, and that's okay. Everybody needs a beat just to think about it, and it was a major surgery. How quickly, Grace, after the surgery, did your seizures stop?
Immediately.
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 She's not had
So-
one since.
And how long has it been since the surgery?
Did Dr. Joa say 2015?
It's been almost 5 years. So it was
Wow.
the surgery was 2019.
Yes.
Incredible. I want to ask Grace, I want to ask you about your life now and the independence you have now that you're seizure free.
Well, I'm living at my own apartment. I have a fiance and I have a cat. So
Oh. Congratulations on your engagement. And the cat too is pretty cool, but that's so sweet that you're engaged and you have your own apartment. Sheila, as mom, it must be amazing. I mean, you go from 20 plus years to seeing your daughter so fragile, and now she's on her own. It's what all moms would want for their child.
Yes, and truly, this process, this surgery at the University of Kansas Health System is a miracle. It's an answer to 30 years of prayers on our part.
Oh man.
You know, amazing that, and Grace has lost. She has a little tiny bit of vision loss, but between visual therapy, and we have an eye doctor that we see a couple times a year, she's doing great. I mean, no seizures after almost 30 years is, I can't even describe the feeling. I watched her suffer for so long, and seizure meds have effects too, the lesser of two evils. And the stigma out there is still not great. Kids and then parents and adults, and this, again, it's been life-changing. I will be forever grateful. It has enhanced her life so much. I'm just very grateful, thankful.
It's beautiful. And again, because of people like you, Sheila and Grace, sharing your story, you're going to help a lot of people. Dr. Ulloa, the science and the strides you're making for people living with epilepsy are simply remarkable. What are some of the newest advancements that people watching can look forward to?
Yes. So first, that's like music to my ears.
I know.
To hear
I
them
saw
say
you
all of that,
clapping your hands. And you heard she had a cat and a fiance.
But yes,
And an
because that's why
apartment.
we do this. I
Yes.
mean, that's the whole point, is so that people can live their lives, and so it's the best news. So, but yeah, the last decade in epilepsy has been really outstanding in terms of new treatments and developments and research. And so probably one of the biggest areas that is evolving right now before like my eyes as I practice is neuromodulation. And so that's devices, implantable devices for epilepsy. That includes the deep brain stimulator and the responsive neurostimulator, RNS. And so there's things, they were FDA approved, several years ago, but there are new ways in which we're using them. And so we're really doing things now that 3 years ago we were not doing. So it's really an exciting field, and helping people that have been told that they were not surgical candidates, and now they are. But I do want to just emphasize that our goal is, can we pinpoint the seizures? Is it a safe area of the brain to remove? Because ultimately, that's the type of surgery that can lead to the outcomes that Grace had.
Ideal outcome.
Exactly. The devices are excellent, and they can lessen the number of seizures a person has, but much less likely that they would actually stop the seizures completely.
Dr. Lever, I want to ask you what it's like to see such a success story, because when you see people, you see them at their most fragile, and often they're feeling like there's no hope. And then to see this success story and how well Grace is doing must be amazing.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I don't even see patients, so
Right.
so it's even better than that. I sit in a dark room and just look at imaging all day.
So this is very
to actually
personal
have some
for you.
feedback, yeah, no, it's amazing. It really makes probably the best, make my day.
So most of your days you are in a dark room looking at imaging?
Yeah, people don't know we exist, I assume. But if you get an MRI, typically it's interpreted by a radiologist, someone trained to read imaging. But one thing I would say that people don't realize is, you don't know who's going to read that scan beforehand. And there are general radiologists that just read all parts of the body and are trained equally in everything. And you can do additional training just in the area of expertise. And as a neuroradiologist, you do additional training just in neuroimaging. So of course it's an advantage looking at an MRI brain, something that you have additional training just in that type of imaging, and not knowing what you're going to get. So I would encourage patients to go to an institution like KU, where everything is read by a subspecialist. Has a clear advantage for any kind of diagnosis.
Well, clearly in this circumstance,
Yes.
it made the world of difference. It's not just
Epilepsy specifically,
Right.
Because I believe we rank, in the top 2 or 3 nationally by procedural volume. So the amount of epilepsy imaging that I'm able to see compared to anywhere in the country is, it's exceptional. And just that experience, all good results are probably just a result of training and experience, and you just can't get that experience anywhere else.
It's not the test, it's who's taking the test, who's reading the test, where
Yes.
you're getting
Yes.
the test, and the experts you're going to meet with after you get that scan,
Correct.
which is huge. We're sure you have plenty of questions. We love our community questions. You can use the chat feature on YouTube, Facebook, the X platform, or you can send us an email at the Medical News Network That information is right there on your screen. And we are going to get to your community questions in a moment. But first, again, congratulations, of course, to the Kansas City Chiefs and also our amazing health system doctors who treat the Kansas City Chiefs. We're talking about doctors Paul Schruppel, Scott Mullen, J.P. Darsh, Brian Vopot, and Luke Thompson. And yes, they got their hands on another Lombardi trophy last night. We're going to be at the parade, covering the whole parade, keeping an eye out for them. I wonder if Taylor Swift's going to be at the parade. You know what I loved? I'm going to take a little sidebar here. I love that she didn't get up onto the stage. She stood on the field. She let Travis hug his mom first. She didn't like upstage the Chiefs or at the moment. So I just thought that was so sweet. Right?
Yes.
I mean, you're nodding. Dr. Ujoa saw it. So are you a Swiftie?
Yes. I better say yes. But yeah, and yesterday I wore red lipstick in honor of her.
Yes. Now the bangs are tricky. I wasn't about to give myself bangs because that can go wrong quickly, right?
Yes.
But the red lipstick at every party. Dr. Lever, I'm sure it was exciting for you to see them wear. Are you a Swiftie?
Of course.
Oh, there you go. Good answer.
I am
Good
human,
answer.
so
I am human. I am a Swiftie. We want to get to Dr. Dana Hawkinson with our COVID count. He's the medical director of infection prevention and control. And I'm going to pass this Patrick Mahomes wobblehead back to Dr. Hawkinson because he's been kind of coveting that. That's been his mini Lombardi trophy that he's been waving through all his updates.
Maybe this was good luck.
Do the quick pass up. I think it
the
was.
Chiefs.
You need to hang on to that and do whatever you did leading up to this victory. So it's hard to go from that to COVID. We're going to do it, though, because we have to, and you're the expert. What is the latest COVID count?
So we haven't got our updated numbers for this week. I mean, maybe some of the other employees were partying hard last night, too, and just getting out of bed a little bit late. Who knows? We had 24 active inpatients last week for COVID. Hopefully that number stays at a plateau or is decreasing. We do know there is some data to support the fact that another respiratory virus, influenza B, is maybe making a rise. So we may have a second peak of influenza this season, but really we just need to wait to see how the next couple weeks play out for that.
I want to ask you about 3 new RSV products that came out in the past year because we're getting some of the first real-world data on how at least one of them works. There's a study published in Eurosurveillance that looked into the monoclonal antibody vaccine given to babies. Dr. Hawkinson, what did that study find? Yeah,
this is a monoclonal antibody that you give to infants during the respiratory viral season, particularly to prevent severe disease from RSV. This is nirsevimab or Beyfortus. This is really good. Again, real-world data showing the impact of these very safe and efficacious drugs. This was a study that took place in Spain. They looked at 3 different sites in Spain, and overall what they found was that those infants that had received this product soon after birth during this respiratory viral season had a 70% reduction in the chance of them going to the hospital. And we all know that is good for everybody. That is especially good for baby, but also good for the parents as well, because we know that when your children are sick, you have to stay home much, not even to speak about the internal anxiety that's going about your child as well. But this drug is showing very good efficacy in preventing hospitalization. Again, from this early data, 70% reduction in the chance of going to the hospital if the infant is infected with RSV. So very good news.
That's great news.
Yeah.
It's a huge percentage.
Yeah.
We also have some really good community questions coming in, so we want to get right to those. Let's start with June. June writes, how many different types of seizures are there? Dr. Ujoa.
Dozens, many. They depend, number one, what classification system you're using, what part of the brain. But I think for practical purposes, it's nice to divide them just into 2 broad categories. Is it focal or is it generalized? Grace had a focal epilepsy. That's why you can actually pinpoint it. Generalized sort of means it involves both sides of the brain, kind of the entire brain at the same time. And so those have different treatment options.
Okay. Ashley has a really, this is a great question because I've often wondered this. Those warnings that they put on video games or at concerts that the flashing lights might cause seizures, how are those helpful, or are those something that we have to do now in every situation where there's any kind of light?
I mean, I think it's helpful for people for which it's applicable. So about 5% of people with epilepsy are what we call photosensitive,
Okay.
where flashing lights could provoke a seizure. So I think it's helpful for people that, yeah, that could be
5%.
affected. 5%, so the vast majority are not photosensitive.
So would Grace be photosensitive to seizures? Did she have those kinds?
Typically, it's the generalized epilepsy that's
Okay.
photosensitive, although some people with focal could be. And Grace, I don't know if you ever noted that flashing lights affected your seizures.
We think they did.
We thought they
We
did.
thought they might have, yeah.
Oh,
at different
interesting.
times. We
So
just
when
always
you're
we just
Go
always
on.
had her close, or cover them if there was a, what are they called?
Strobe light.
Strobe lights anywhere, and avoided them when we could.
So Grace, when you see those warnings, those work for you. You close your eyes or turn away or don't watch.
Yeah, just I was at a concert recently, and they had a lot of strobe lights going on, and my fiance covered my eyes for me.
Oh, that's sweet. You got a good one.
Yeah.
I have a question for Dr. Ulloa, the keto diet. I remember about 10 years ago, before the keto diet was mainstream, and we started seeing it on food products everywhere, it was advertised or marketed as a way to treat epilepsy. Is that a thing? Do you ever prescribe the keto diet?
It is a thing, yes. There's various dietary treatments for epilepsy. The keto diet or ketogenic diet essentially is very high protein, high fat, low carbohydrate. And it's been studied specifically for epilepsy. We see that patients, about half of the patients who do it could lower their seizures by half. It's just very challenging. You know, it's hard for people to stick to it because you have to stick to it to really gain the benefits from it.
And it's an extreme diet. When people really stick to that,
it is a complete change, and it has risks. You know, your cholesterol can go up,
Right.
for example.
Right.
You could have vitamin deficiencies. But it is a treatment, and yes, we have patients on the ketogenic diet.
interesting.
And-
I want to get today's takeaways. And Sheila.
Oh, I forgot to interject that on the 20 years of hauling Grace all over the country. We actually went to Johns Hopkins where they had pioneered that diet and put her on the ketogenic diet when she was 6. When she was 6, we stayed on about 6 months. The first couple months, I mean, it's a terrible amount of work, very restrictive. She probably lost 10 or 15 pounds. She was a bag of bones. She stayed seizure-free for about 3 or 4 months. And then the seizures came back full bore. She wound up being in intensive care there at University of Kansas Medical Center. Status epilepticus, maybe, is what it was called, to try and get her to just slowly drop the diet, incorporate all of her meds back on, and realize that was not going to work either. So that was kind of our last resort, giving a poke to Joa.
So it's not something that someone watching should just start self-treating themselves with. That was just one tool in the toolbox that you sometimes use. It doesn't work for everyone. It didn't necessarily work for Grace either, except temporarily. For today's takeaways, Dr. Lever, what do you want people watching to know?
Just the importance of imaging. That's probably not understood, but just the quality of the scan, who's going to interpret it, whether they're specially trained or have experience in that area. And specific to epilepsy, again, the epilepsy program here, again, it's really nationally ranked by just numbers, and it doesn't exist without Dr. Ulloa, but being a part of that and being able to have someone, tell you where to look and to get direction. I go back and take second, third looks at scans. You're not going to get that somewhere else. That to get that team approach and that attention to detail. So
It's important.
I would come here for epilepsy. Yes.
Grace and Sheila certainly are glad that they came here and they found you. Dr. Ulloa, what's your message?
Oh my gosh, there's so much. I would echo what Dr. Lever said. I'm blessed to work with this amazing team. I mean, if people really knew, like, behind the scenes, how much we conferred with each other and talked to each other and, discussed things, and how many times we are looking at the images and at the EEG, it's multiple, because we want to figure things out. So at least once a week, I'm sending Dr. Lever emails. Can you look at this MRI for me?
Right.
So if the radiologist who read it didn't find anything and I didn't find anything, I send it off to him, because until he looks at it, I'm not satisfied that there's nothing there. Just within the last couple of weeks, he found a lesion in a patient where it completely will change the course of her treatment.
Wow.
So yes, and I think that those are things people don't always know. So as a level 4 comprehensive epilepsy center, and one that is really high on surgical volumes, we're able to really see these things through.
That's so powerful. Dr. Lever, I hate that you spend days in a dark room just looking at things alone. I want you to come here and hang out with us
I'm
more.
glad I could come here and make you guys look better. I assume that's what I'm here for.
You're here to highlight your expertise. I mean, the fact that you're like the superpower, the secret
Eagle eye
weapon.
lever, we call him.
Eagle eye lever?
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. That works. You should get that on your embroidered on your white coat.
Thanks.
Grace, what's the best part about living life seizure-free?
I'd have to say that I can finally do things now on my own.
And you don't have to worry about having
I
a
don't have
seizure
to worry about having them anymore,
or falling down,
or falling down, or
people making
fun of me,
being so cautious.
or
Oh, that's great.
leaving.
You live your
I mean, she
life
had-
freely and do what you want.
Yep. And employers make fun of her, kids make fun of her, uneducated teachers would doubt what was going on because her seizures were so bizarre and strange with the eye movement. That it's not good for your persona and your ego, but she's strong, so she barreled through that. So it's such a relief for her and for us. Just a freeing way to live. It's amazing.
Right, and after seeing your daughter suffer for decades, that must be so wonderful just to sit beside her and be on this program with her doctors, knowing that she's seizure-free.
And tell other patients, don't give up. Don't just accept one person's thought about something. Keep pursuing it. And I believe in the power of prayer too. And for 28 years we prayed about Grace, and we saw doctor after doctor, and then all of a sudden, here we are. So truly, miracles do happen, and the staff there that works in this field are really amazing. Just really, really smart individuals. Just great people.
And Dr. Ujoa is saying, you're right, don't give up. Don't give up. Dr. Lever said, Eagle Eye Lever says the same thing. Don't give up. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you for being so brave. And Grace, particularly, thank you for having the courage to come on and educate us about what life is like when you have epilepsy. Thank you to our doctors and for watching. We will see you right back here tomorrow morning.
Coming up tomorrow on the Morning Medical Update. More people than ever are surviving pancreatic cancer, but it remains one of the most challenging cancers to diagnose and treat. I'm Jessica Lovell. On the next Morning Medical Update, we learn what helped one survivor beat the odds. Tuesday at 8.
Subscribe to our Morning Medical Update and Open Mics with Dr. Stites podcasts. Now everywhere podcasts are available.